I never expected her to remember my name, let alone everything else. It was just after 10 on a Thursday night, the kind of late that smells like wet pavement and burnt coffee. The corner diner near my apartment, fluorescent lights buzzing low, was empty except for her. She sat in the booth by the window, arms folded over a leather jacket that had seen better winters. I hesitated at the door, pulling the strap of my backpack tighter, pretending I hadn't noticed. "Hey," she said, without looking up at first. Just a soft acknowledgement, a tilt of her head. Then a small smile. That smile was the first thing I remembered about her that night. Hey," I muttered. My hands felt warm and awkward inside my hoodie pocket. She glanced up then, flicked her eyes, toward my hands, and I realized I was fiddling with a napkin I'd grabbed from the counter, still folding them that way. She asked, nodding toward the corner where I'd stacked a couple during lunch last week. I laughed before I could stop myself. Old habits die hard. Her eyes softened, and I caught that little pause, the quiet, measured way she looked at me, like she was noting details no one else did. I had never thought someone could make ordinary observation feel intimate. It made my chest tighten. We didn't talk much after that. Coffee cups clinked between sips, and the hum of the fridge behind the counter filled the gaps. I watched her fingers trace the rim of her mug. I wanted to reach out and touch them, just once, and then I reminded myself who she was. My friend's mom. The thought made my stomach hollow. I had been coming here for weeks, mostly to kill time before my night shift, mostly to avoid going home to an empty apartment. There were unsent texts lingering in my drafts, staring at me from the glow of my phone. I wondered if she felt the same quiet pull, the kind that makes you linger in hallways, in doorways, just to be near someone without needing words. She laughed at something I said, a dry little chuckle that lingered longer than the words. I noticed how she shifted in her seat, the way her leg brushed the edge of the booth. Small things, almost meaningless. But in that diner, at that late hour, it felt like revelation. "I didn't know you liked it black," she said. She didn't ask about my day, my life. Just the coffee. It felt like trust. "Yeah, you stomach it. Black's fine." My voice sounded small to me, but I caught her smile again. That quiet, knowing smile that made me want to talk for hours and not at all. I wondered if she noticed me noticing her. The slight curl of her hair when she leaned back. The way her hand brushed a stray strand from her face. Little things that wouldn't matter to anyone else, but in the light of that diner, they mattered like emergencies. By the time I left, my stomach was tight with the weight of saying goodbye. I stepped outside into the night, air sharp with cold, and she was already at the counter, waving. I waved back, slow, hesitant. Then my phone buzzed. A text I hadn't expected. "Don't rush home. I'll be here tomorrow night if you want company." I stopped walking. The neon sign of the diner flickered above, buzzing quietly. My thumb hovered over the reply button, unsure, hesitant. My heart thumped louder than it should. I didn't know if this was reckless or if it was something else entirely. But I knew for the first time in a long while that I wanted to find out. The next night, I found her already at the diner, stirring her tea slowly, eyes tracing the steam curling from the cup. I slid into the booth across from her, feeling my backpack heavier than it had any right to be. "You came," she said, and I heard a hint of surprise, though her tone was casual, practiced. She glanced down at her teacup, then back at me, and I caught a flicker in her eyes that made my chest tighten. "Thought I'd see if you were serious," I mumbled. My hands rested on the table, awkwardly near hers. She smiled, but it didn't reach the corners of her eyes. "I'm always serious about tea," she said, though the edge of humor softened it. Then she leaned back, and for a moment, the diner felt small, quiet, like it had shrunk around us. My mom always made tea this way," she said after a pause. "Late at night, if I couldn't sleep. She'd just sit there, waiting for the kitchen to warm up, I guess. Didn't talk much. Just there." Her voice dropped, almost a whisper. She traced the rim of her cup again. I nodded, though I didn't know what to say. I could imagine her as a kid in that kitchen, small hands curled around a steaming mug, quiet and patient. There was a softness there I hadn't seen before, something that made her feel even more untouchable. We sat in silence for a while, neither of us needing to fill it. I noticed the way her fingers flexed around the cup, the subtle shift of her shoulders. My mind wandered to my own empty apartment, to the unsent messages still blinking on my phone, to what it would feel like to touch her hand without anyone knowing. Forbidden thoughts, the kind that made my stomach both warm and heavy. "I'm divorced," she said suddenly, almost like she hadn't intended to. Her words hung in the air. I blinked. Not that it matters. Just thought you should know. I wanted to say something, anything, but my voice got stuck behind a wall of hesitation. I imagined scenarios that would never happen. Sitting on her couch, laughing at nothing, holding her hand, being caught in a moment that could never exist outside this diner. Instead, I reached for the sugar jar, handed it to her without looking. She took it, brushing her fingers against mine, just briefly. A touch so small it could have been accidental, but it wasn't. My chest tightened. We smiled then, quiet and shared, like a private joke. The kind that made the world outside the diner feel distant, irrelevant. I could feel her glance flick toward me and linger, not quite meeting my eyes, not quite leaving them. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. I stopped by her apartment that evening, carrying the grocery bag I promised to drop off. She opened the door almost immediately, hair pulled back loosely, a sweater that smelled faintly of vanilla, and something else I couldn't name. "Oh, you're early," she said, tilting her head. There was a pause, long enough that I felt it stretch against my chest. "Yeah, thought I'd help," I said, shifting my weight. My fingers curled around the strap of the bag, unsure whether to hand it over or drop it. She glanced at the bag, then back at me. "Thanks, I guess." Her voice wasn't cold, just hesitant. The hesitation made my stomach lurch. We moved through the kitchen slowly. She washed the vegetables while I unpacked the rest. Every now and then, our hands brushed, light almost accidental. My heart jumped each time. I caught her looking at me out of the corner of her eye, then quickly looking away. I wanted to say something, anything, but I didn't. Instead, I stacked the cans, folded the plastic bags, trying not to notice how close she was. Close enough that her shoulder grazed mine. Close enough that the faint scent of her hair made my throat dry. We didn't talk much. When she hummed softly while rinsing, I felt a ridiculous ache, like the sound belonged only to me. I imagined 100 scenarios, some daring, some impossible. I reminded myself to be patient, careful. She wasn't mine. Not really. Then a sound from the hallway, her neighbor's dog barking, and she flinched. I flinched too. Our shared glance was a pause that said more than words could. I reached for a cup. She turned to do the same. Our fingers collided. I froze. She froze. Just for a beat, and then we let go. She set the cup down with her back to me, leaning against the counter. I felt like I'd stepped too far, though my legs hadn't moved. "Do you need anything else?" she asked, voice careful. Not a question. Not really. "No, I think I'm good," I said. My voice sounded small, too honest. I wanted to stay, but also not. Wanted to lean in, but also retreat. She laughed softly, almost under her breath. "You're always so careful." Her eyes flicked toward mine. I felt the weight of what she didn't say. I swallowed, close enough now that I could feel her warmth. She didn't move. I didn't move. And in that pause, I saw the edge of something we both felt but neither wanted to name. A brush of hands, a tilt of the head, a breath held too long. Then the dog barked again, closer this time. She stepped back slightly. I stepped back too. I left not long after, bag forgotten in my hand for a second as I lingered by the door. Her eyes followed me to the threshold, cautious, hesitant. I wanted to say something, anything, but it stayed in my chest, heavy and unspoken. Outside, the street was empty. I pressed my hand against the cool metal of the doorknob, as if it could hold the tension. I couldn't. I almost texted her. Almost. Instead, I walked away, thinking about that pause, that breath, that near touch. The part of me that wanted to lean in and see what would happen stayed behind with her. It was late evening when we ended up on the park bench, the city quiet except for distant traffic and the occasional scrape of a bike tire over the pavement. I carried my backpack loosely at my side, hands tucked into the straps. She sat beside me, knees together, hands folded in her lap. "Funny," she said after a long pause. I never thought I'd sit here with you. She let the words trail off. I didn't answer immediately. I wanted to, but the right words were gone somewhere between my stomach and my throat. I stared at the ground, at the scattered leaves glowing under the street lamp. I saw him today, she said quietly, almost too quiet. Her eyes flicked toward me and away again. Your friend, he mentioned something about his mom. About you. Made me. I don't know where. My chest tightened. I hadn't realized how fragile I felt until that moment. The thought of anyone else seeing her like this, laughing, talking, living without me. I don't know why it bothers me, she continued, voice softer now. Maybe I shouldn't let it, but it does. I wanted to reach out, wanted to tell her I understood more than she thought. But my hand stayed on my backpack strap. Instead, I watched her fingers curl over each other, tight, restless. I feel like I shouldn't want, she paused. But I do. The pause hung between us like smoke. I could feel her gaze, hesitant, afraid, waiting for something I didn't know if I could give. I imagined what it would be like to lean closer, to let my shoulder touch hers, to let the air between us carry the things neither of us dared speak. I imagined the warmth of her hand brushing mine, the weight of our almost confessions spilling into reality. Instead, I shifted slightly, careful not to move too close. I feel the same, I said, voice small, careful. Too careful, but it was the truth, folded in hesitation. She exhaled, a quiet sound, almost a sigh. Her eyes glistened faintly in the lamplight, but she didn't look at me directly. Instead, she traced a line on her knee with the tip of her finger. I imagined what it would be like if she looked up and finally let herself. I don't want to ruin anything, she whispered. Or, I don't want this to be something we regret. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her the risk was the point. But I stayed silent. The bench felt smaller. The night stretched around us, holding its breath. We both leaned back slightly, enough to make space, but not enough to break the tension. Her shoulder nearly brushed mine again, and the brush alone was like a spark I wasn't sure I was ready to touch. I opened my mouth, closed again. My mind raced with the things I wanted to say, the things I couldn't. Then she asked, not looking at me, but in a voice that was more question than statement, what happens if we stop pretending? I didn't answer. I didn't move. The leaves drifted past us, caught in the lamplight, carrying the unspoken, the almost, the everything we weren't ready to face. I noticed it first in the way she didn't laugh at my jokes. Not that she never laughed, just the timing was off. A pause where there used to be warmth. The way she folded her arms over her teacup, fingers tracing the rim like she wasn't really there. I stopped by her apartment that Thursday, the one she had always welcomed me into, and there was a note on the counter. Just a scrap of paper with a line in her careful handwriting. Busy tonight. I stared at it for longer than I should have. My backpack slipped from my shoulder. Her words weren't harsh. They weren't even unusual. But something about the quiet, the lack of her, felt heavy in the apartment. The next day I called. Left a voicemail. Nothing. I sat on the edge of my bed afterward, phone in hand, thinking of all the almost moments that hung in the air between. Later, I learned, through an offhand comment from a friend, that she had been seeing someone, or at least talking to someone. The words didn't land as betrayal exactly, but as a reminder, the world existed outside the bench, outside the diner, outside the almost confession we hadn't shared. I imagined all the what-ifs that I wasn't supposed to imagine. I rewound our moments, the touch of her fingers on mine, the almost whispered confessions, the pause on the park bench. And now, those moments felt like they were caught in amber, unreachable. I stopped by her apartment a few nights later, planning to knock. My hand hovered over the door, knuckles white, and then I stopped. She wasn't expecting me. I wasn't sure if she wanted me there. So I walked away. I sat on a nearby bench, watching the street, wondering if I should text her. I opened my phone, thumb hovering over her name. The message I drafted didn't make it past the first line. I deleted it. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. The coffee I carried from the corner shop went cold. Leaves drifted past. I thought about all the times we'd almost crossed, and all the times we hadn't. The booth at the diner remained empty that night. My backpack felt heavier, my hands colder, and I waited quietly for something that might never come. I found her in the kitchen that evening, the apartment dimly lit except for the faint glow from the stovetop. She was stirring something in a pan, humming softly, the scent of onions and olive oil filling the small space. I didn't knock. I didn't announce myself. I just leaned against the doorframe, backpack heavy on my shoulder, heart heavier. She glanced up, startled, then softened. "You're here," she said, voice careful. Not a question, not a statement, just acknowledgement. I said, and immediately felt the words tumble too fast, too nervous. My hands twisted the strap of my bag. I wanted to drop it, wanted to reach out, wanted to retreat. She set the pan down, wiped her hands on a towel. I noticed the way her fingers lingered on the fabric, the small shiver in her shoulders. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. I swallowed, looking at the counter between us, at the chopping board, at the coffee mug she'd left half full. I didn't want to stop coming, I admitted, voice low. My fingers twitched against the strap, like they needed to move, but didn't know where. Her eyes softened, tracing the line of my jaw, then looking away. "I didn't know if you wanted me to," she said. The pause was long, heavy, almost unbearable. I wanted to reach out, to bridge the space that had grown between us over weeks of missed texts, empty booths, and quiet pauses. But I hesitated, thinking of everything we risked, the age gap, the friend, the almost moments that could have ended badly. Instead, I stepped closer, careful, close enough that our shoulders nearly brushed. My voice dropped lower. "Ido, I've wanted you here." She blinked, and for a moment, the world shrank to the kitchen, the smell of sautéed onions, the hum of the refrigerator. She let a small exhale escape, the kind that releases something you didn't know you were holding. "I didn't want to mess things up," she whispered, tracing a line along the edge of the counter, fingers curling slightly. "You're not messing anything up," I said. It wasn't grand. It wasn't poetic, but it was true. My thumb brushed the strap of my bag, and then I let my hand fall, finally free of nervous tension. She finally looked at me. Not fully, not yet, just enough. The weight of weeks of hesitation and longing hung between us. Then she did something small, human, a smile that wasn't dramatic, wasn't full of promise, but enough to tell me she was here, she was present, and she was okay. I nodded, almost imperceptibly. My chest loosened. I wanted to say more, but the words stayed lodged in my throat. Instead, I reached out, lightly brushing the back of her hand with mine. She didn't pull away. Not fully. Not yet. And in that quiet, in the simple connection, the tension of everything unsaid finally eased, enough that we could breathe, even if the rest of the world hadn't noticed. "Okay," she said softly. "Just one word. Enough." I nodded again, feeling it settle between us. Weeks passed, not in grand leaps, not with fanfare or confessions shouted across rooms. Just mornings and evenings that settled into a rhythm we barely noticed. I found her at the diner again one Thursday. Corner booth lit the same way, coffee already poured. Black, just the way I remembered. She waved me over without a word, just the tilt of her head, the half-smile that had grown familiar. I slid in opposite her, letting my bag fall to the floor. The napkin stack on the table was crooked, just like before. We didn't need to talk about the weeks apart, the unsent messages, the hesitation that had felt like ice in our chests. It was gone, or softened. There was warmth in the quiet, in the way she reached for her mug first, in the way I folded the napkin absent-mindedly, hand steady this time. Some mornings I dropped by just as the park emptied of its runners and joggers. We'd sit on the bench, coffee in hand, letting the wind carry leaves across our knees. No words, just presence. The world outside could be messy, loud, demanding. We had found a pocket of calm inside it. Sometimes she hummed while stirring her tea at home. I'd lean against the doorway, watch her fingers trace the rim of the cup. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. She had learned the quiet gestures that spoke louder than sentences. And yet, life didn't pause. There were errands, phone calls, deadlines. One evening, a friend's kid waved from the street, and we both laughed quietly at the memory of near misses and misunderstandings. Even that, ordinary, felt extraordinary now. I thought about the apartment, the kitchen, the way she had let me close without stepping away, the way she had smiled softly and said, "Okay," and how I had finally let myself stay. Every ordinary corner held a memory. Every brush of fingers, a reminder that we had navigated the tension, the almost, the fear. It wasn't perfect. Sometimes her eyes drifted when she was lost in thought. Sometimes I caught my reflection in a window and realized how much older I looked than I had felt. But it was enough. Grounded. Warm. Familiar in a way that didn't need labels. On a Thursday morning, exactly 8:47 a.m., I found her on the bench again, black coffee in hand, jacket draped over her shoulders. I joined her silently. The leaves moved in patterns only we noticed, the sunlight caught just so across her hair. She looked at me, half smile, and I felt it, the earned peace of months of hesitation, of quiet patience, of small risks finally realized. I sipped my coffee. She sipped hers. We didn't speak, except for a soft, shared laugh when a gust of wind ruffled the napkin between us. And in that moment, the bench, the coffee, the late mornings, it all made sense. Quiet, small, achingly familiar. We didn't need words for what had been built slowly, quietly, in the spaces between almosts and pauses. I thought, finally, just to myself, she knows me. And I know her. That's enough.